You ever feel like someone saw you before you even existed? The party ended just after 2 a.m., but Emily Carter was still standing under the fading glow of the mansion lights, heels in hand, heart refusing to slow down, because she couldn't forget him, the man from inside, the one who didn't laugh, didn't drink, didn't belong, yet somehow owned the entire room without saying a word. And the moment she spilled wine on his sleeve, everything had gone silent, not awkward silent, but wrong silent, like the air itself was waiting for something to happen, and, instead of anger, instead of disgust, he had just looked at her, long enough for her pulse to trip over itself, long enough to make her forget to breathe. Careful, he had said softly, voice low, almost amused, and somehow that single word followed her out into the night, into the cold, into the quiet street where her rideshare app kept refreshing with no drivers nearby. 7 minutes, 8 minutes, 9. The numbers blinking while the wind picked up, and then she felt it again, that same shift, that same invisible pressure that had filled the ballroom. Only now it was closer, heavier, like it had followed her outside. Emily turned slowly, telling herself not to overreact. But he was there, standing at the edge of the streetlight, exactly where the shadows began, like he had been waiting, like he knew she would look back. Sebastian Voss. That was the name whispered all night, a name people didn't say too loudly, a name followed by lowered voices and careful glances, and now he was here, watching her, not moving, not speaking, just there, and something about it should have scared her. Every instinct said it should, but it didn't. Instead it felt familiar, like recognizing a face in a dream you couldn't remember. You shouldn't be out here alone, he said, stepping forward, his voice cutting clean through the wind, calm, controlled, too steady for someone who had just left a crowded party. Emily let out a small laugh, trying to ground herself. And you should, she replied, surprising even herself, because she didn't usually talk back, didn't usually stand her ground, but something about him made normal rules feel irrelevant. His lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, more like a decision, and for a brief second, just a flicker, his eyes caught the light wrong, not reflecting it, but holding it, like something deeper burned underneath, something old, something impossible. Emily blinked, and it was gone, just shadows, just a man in a perfectly tailored coat, standing too still in the middle of the night. You dropped this, he said, holding out her small silver bracelet, the one she didn't even realize she had lost. Emily stepped closer without thinking, reaching for it, their fingers brushing for less than a second. But the moment stretched, something sharp and electric passing through her skin, not painful, just undeniable, and Sebastian froze, completely, like the world had just shifted beneath his feet, his gaze locking onto her with sudden intensity, not curiosity, not interest, something far more dangerous, something that made her chest tighten without understanding why. And when he spoke again, his voice had changed, lower now, quieter, almost like a warning he hadn't meant to say out loud. That wasn't supposed to happen. Emily's hand instinctively pulled back, her breath catching as she searched his face for any sign that he was joking. But Sebastian did not move, did not blink, his gaze fixed on her like she had just rewritten something fundamental, something he had believed unchangeable. And for a moment neither of them spoke, the city noise fading into a distant hum, leaving only the sound of her own heartbeat echoing in her ears. What do you mean? She asked, forcing a small, uncertain smile, trying to turn the moment back into something normal, something explainable. But the look in his eyes did not soften. If anything, it sharpened, like he was seeing her for the first time and not liking what that meant. It is nothing you need to worry about, he said finally, too quickly, too controlled, like the words had been chosen with care, and that only made her more aware that something was wrong. Because people who had nothing to hide did not speak like that, did not stand so still, did not make the air feel heavier just by existing. Emily crossed her arms slightly, more to steady herself than anything else. You keep saying things like that, she said, her voice quieter now, more cautious, and then acting like everything is normal, but it is not. The wind picked up again, tugging at her dress, and she suddenly felt very aware of how alone this street was, how empty, how far away the rest of the world seemed. Sebastian's eyes flickered, not red this time, but darker somehow, deeper, like a shadow had passed through them, and for a split second, something like conflict crossed his expression, something almost human. "You should go home," he said, stepping back, creating distance between them as if that would fix whatever had just happened. "Your car will be here in 2 minutes." Emily frowned, glancing down at her phone, the screen lighting up exactly as he had said. The ride now 2 minutes away, and a chill ran down her spine that had nothing to do with the weather. "How did you know that?" she asked, looking back up at him. But he had already turned slightly, his attention shifting to something beyond her, something she could not see, his posture tightening just enough to make her notice, like he was listening to something far away, something only he could hear. "You are not safe standing here," he said, his voice lower now, almost urgent, and that was the moment fear finally broke through the strange calm she had been holding on to, not because of what he said, but because of how he said it, like a warning he could not explain. Emily took a step back, clutching her bracelet, her mind racing for a reason, any reason, to make sense of this. But there was none, only questions stacking on top of each other, only the undeniable feeling that she had stepped into something she did not understand, something that had already begun moving around her without her permission. And when her car finally pulled up, headlights cutting through the darkness, she hesitated, just for a second, looking back at him, expecting him to say something, to explain, to stop her, but Sebastian only stood there, half in shadow, watching her with an expression she could not read, and as she opened the door and slid into the back seat, she realized something that made her stomach drop. He had not looked surprised when she touched him, he had looked afraid, and somehow that was worse. The car door shut with a soft click that felt louder than it should have, sealing Emily into a space that suddenly felt too small, too quiet. The driver glancing at her through the rearview mirror before pulling away, and as the mansion disappeared behind them, she told herself it was over, just a strange night, just a strange man. But her fingers tightened around the bracelet in her palm, the metal still faintly warm, and that made no sense. Not after standing in the cold for nearly 10 minutes, not after the wind had cut straight through her dress. She looked out the window, watching the empty streets pass by in long stretches of silence. But the feeling did not leave, that weight, that awareness that something had shifted, and then she saw it. Not clearly, just a reflection in the glass, a shadow that moved when nothing else did. Her breath caught as she turned slightly, but there was nothing behind them, just an empty road and distant streetlights. "You okay back there?" the driver asked, casual, unaware. Emily forced a small nod. "Yeah, just tired," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. But as she turned back to the window, the reflection was gone, replaced only by her own pale face staring back at her, eyes a little wider than before, heart beating a little faster than it should. She tried to laugh it off, blame it on exhaustion, on too many hours on her feet, on too much noise and too many people. But then her phone buzzed softly in her hand, the sound sharp in the quiet car. She looked down, expecting a notification from the ride app, but it was not that. It was a message, no name, no number, just a single line that made her chest tighten instantly. "Do not look behind you again." Emily froze, her breath catching halfway as her eyes lifted slowly toward the mirror. The driver was still there, still focused on the road. Nothing unusual, nothing wrong. But her pulse spiked anyway, because she had not told anyone what she had seen, had not said a word, and yet someone knew. Her fingers hovered over the screen, unsure whether to respond, unsure whether that would make it worse. And then another message appeared, just as quickly, just as quietly. "You are being watched." Her heart slammed against her ribs, the car suddenly feeling too exposed, too open, every passing light casting shadows that seemed to move a second too late. Emily swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay still, to breathe, to think. But one thought kept pushing through everything else, louder than the fear, louder than the confusion, because there was only one person who had looked at her like that tonight. Only one person who had known things he should not know. And as the city lights flickered across the glass, she realized something that made her grip tighten around her phone. If Sebastian Voss was not the one watching her, then that meant something else was, and whatever it was, it already knew exactly who she was. The rest of the ride passed in silence, but it was not the kind that felt peaceful. It pressed in on Emily from all sides. every passing streetlight flashing across the window like a signal she could not decode. Her phone still in her hand, the messages sitting there unchanged, no sender, no explanation, just a quiet confirmation that something unseen had already stepped into her life, and she could not step back out. "We are here," the driver said, his voice cutting through her thoughts, and she blinked, realizing they had already pulled up outside her apartment building, a narrow brick structure that suddenly looked unfamiliar, like she was seeing it for the first time. Emily forced a quick thank you, pushing the door open and stepping out into the cool night air, but the moment her feet hit the pavement, the feeling returned, stronger now, sharper, like a presence just out of reach. She turned instinctively, scanning the street, the parked cars, the dark windows above, but nothing moved, nothing stood out. Everything looked exactly as it should, and that was what made it worse, because it meant whatever was watching her did not need to be seen. Emily tightened her grip on her phone and started toward the entrance, her heels clicking softly against the concrete, each step echoing louder than the last. The door was just a few feet away when she hesitated, her reflection faintly visible in the glass, pale, tense, eyes searching for something she could not name. And then, just for a second, it changed, not her reflection, but what stood behind it, a figure, tall, still, too still, positioned just far enough back that she could not see his face clearly, but she did not need to, because she knew that presence now, recognized it the same way you recognize a voice in a crowded room. Sebastian. Her breath caught as she spun around, heart jumping. But the sidewalk behind her was empty, completely empty, no footsteps, no movement, nothing but the distant hum of the city. Emily exhaled slowly, shaking her head, trying to steady herself. This was not real. It could not be. But then her phone buzzed again, sharp, immediate. Her eyes dropped to the screen before she could stop herself. A new message. Just one line. "Do not go inside." Her stomach tightened instantly, her hand hovering near the door handle, every instinct pulling her in opposite directions. Go inside, lock the door, be safe, or stay out here where she could see everything, where nothing could hide. But the words from earlier echoed in her mind. You are being watched. And suddenly the building did not feel like safety anymore. It felt like a trap. Emily took a slow step back, her breathing shallow now, her thoughts racing faster than she could catch them. And then she heard it. Not a voice. Not a sound exactly. More like the absence of sound. The air shifting again, just like before, just like outside the mansion. And this time, she did not need to turn to know he was there. Because when Sebastian finally spoke, his voice was right behind her, low, controlled, and far too close. I told you, you are not safe. Emily froze, her breath stopping mid-inhale as the sound of his voice settled into the space behind her. Too close, impossibly close. And yet she had heard nothing, no footsteps, no movement, nothing that could explain how he had gotten there without her noticing. Slowly, carefully, she turned, her heart pounding so loud she was certain he could hear it. And there he was, standing just inches away, his presence overwhelming in a way that had nothing to do with physical distance. His expression calm, controlled, but his eyes were different now, darker, more intense, like whatever he had been holding back earlier was slipping through. You need to come with me, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. But Emily shook her head immediately, stepping back, her hand tightening around her phone like it could anchor her to something real. No, she said, her voice shaky but firm. You do not get to show up like this and tell me what to do. I do not even know what is happening. For a brief second, something flickered across his face. Not anger, not frustration, something closer to urgency, something almost desperate. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that same cold control. That is exactly the problem, he replied quietly, his gaze shifting past her, scanning the street with a precision that made her uneasy, like he was tracking something she could not see. If you stay here, they will find you. Emily swallowed hard, her pulse racing. Who is they? She demanded. But he did not answer right away. And that silence said more than anything else could have, because it meant the answer was not simple. It meant whatever was out there was something he did not want to name. People who should not know you exist, he said finally, his voice lower now. And something in the way he said it made her stomach twist. because it sounded less like a warning and more like a fact that had already been set in motion. Emily glanced at her apartment door, just a few feet away, the place that had always meant safety, routine, normal life. And now it felt like a line she was not supposed to cross, like stepping inside would not protect her. It would expose her. "This does not make any sense," she whispered, more to herself than to him, her thoughts spiraling, trying to find something logical to hold on to. But there was nothing, only the memory of his eyes changing, the messages on her phone, the feeling of being watched, and now this, him standing here, telling her that everything she thought she understood was already wrong. "I know," Sebastian said, softer this time. And for the first time since she met him, there was no distance in his voice, no cold edge, just something quiet and honest. "But if you trust anything tonight, trust this." He took a small step closer, not threatening, not forcing, just enough to close the space between them. "You cannot go back to the life you had an hour ago." Emily's chest tightened, her mind catching on those words, because deep down, she already knew that was true. She had felt it the moment their hands touched, the moment everything shifted, and now standing here, caught between the door behind her and the man in front of her, she realized she was already choosing, whether she wanted to or not. And when she finally looked up at him again, her voice barely above a whisper, there was only one question left that mattered. "If I go with you, what exactly are you?" For a moment, Sebastian did not answer. But this time the silence felt heavier, like something unseen was listening to it, measuring it, his gaze fixed on Emily with a sharp intensity that had nothing to do with hesitation and everything to do with consequence. "If I tell you," he said slowly, "it will not just change what you think you saw tonight. It will change what sees you from now on." Emily's pulse quickened, but she did not step back, because deep down she already felt it, that shift, that invisible line she had crossed without knowing. "It already has," she replied, and that was enough. Something in his expression hardened into decision. "You are not supposed to trigger a resonance," he said, his voice lower now, more precise, like he was choosing words from a language she did not fully understand. "Most humans cannot even register what I am. They pass through it, untouched, unnoticed." His eyes darkened slightly, holding hers, "But you did not." Emily frowned, her mind struggling to catch up. "Resonance?" she repeated, and this time he nodded once. "When you touched me, your pulse aligned with something older than either of us, something that marks you." A chill ran down her spine, because that word, mark, felt permanent in a way nothing else had tonight. "Marked for what?" she asked, but Sebastian's attention shifted again, sharper now, like a thread had just snapped somewhere far away. "Not what," he said quietly. "Who?" And before she could ask anything else, his voice dropped further, urgent now. "We do not have time." They felt it. Emily's breath caught. "Felt what?" she pressed. But the answer came with the air itself shifting again, stronger than before, like something had just locked onto her location, and Sebastian's expression changed instantly, all control sharpening into focus. "The mark," he said, and the way he said it made it clear this was not a theory. It was happening now. "They found you." Emily's chest tightened as the world around her seemed to narrow, every sound fading except the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat. Too loud, too exposed. "Who are they?" she asked again. But this time her voice was steadier, because fear had shifted into something sharper, something that demanded answers. Sebastian did not look at her when he answered, his gaze scanning the street like he could see beyond it. "They are not like me," he said, each word deliberate. "I follow laws, boundaries, agreements that keep my kind hidden." His jaw tightened slightly. "They do not." Emily felt a chill settle deeper into her bones. "So they can just watch anyone?" she asked, and he shook his head once. "No," he said, finally turning back to her. "Only those who break the barrier." His eyes held hers, unwavering. "Only those who become visible." The word echoed in her mind again, heavier now, more defined. Visible, not just to him, but to something else entirely, something that did not belong in her world. "And you think that is me?" she said quietly, and Sebastian did not hesitate this time. "I know it is," he replied, and that certainty hit harder than anything else, because it meant this was not random, not fixable, not something she could walk away from. The air grew colder again, sharper, and this time Emily did not need to be told. She felt it immediately, that same pressure, only closer, more focused, like something was narrowing in on a target. "Stay with me," Sebastian said, stepping closer, his voice cutting through. "Everything else, do not react to anything you see." Emily nodded, her fingers curling slightly at her sides, forcing herself to stay grounded. But then she saw it again, movement where there should have been none, not just one shadow this time, but several, faint distortions along the edges of the street, too still, too deliberate, like they were observing rather than approaching. Her breath hitched, but she did not move, did not speak, and for a moment, everything held, suspended in silence, until every light on the block cut out at once, dropping them into darkness so complete it felt like falling. And this time, the presence did not stay distant. It moved closer, circling, testing, searching, and Sebastian's hand closed around her wrist again, firm, grounding. "Do not let go," he said, his voice low and absolute. The darkness did not feel empty anymore. It felt occupied, layered with something that was aware of her in a way nothing ever had been before. Emily's breath came slower now, controlled, because panic would not help her, not here, not now. She focused on the only real thing in reach, Sebastian's grip, steady and unyielding, anchoring her to something solid while everything else shifted around them. "They are searching for the source," he murmured, so quietly she almost missed it. "They can feel the resonance, but they do not fully understand it yet." Emily swallowed hard, forcing her voice to remain steady. "So what happens when they do?" she asked, and for the first time, Sebastian did not answer immediately. That hesitation said everything she needed to know, because it meant the outcome was not something he could control, not something he could guarantee. The air shifted again, closer now, brushing past her shoulder with a precision that made her skin tighten, but she did not turn, did not react. She held still, just like he told her. Seconds stretched, each one heavier than the last, until finally, something changed, not disappearing, not retreating, but pulling back, like whatever had been circling had gathered enough information. The pressure eased slightly, just enough for her to breathe deeper, and then, one by one, the lights flickered. Back on, the street rebuilding itself around them in fragments of normalcy. Emily blinked rapidly, grounding herself in the familiar shapes, the buildings, the cars, the pavement beneath her feet. But nothing felt the same anymore, because now she knew something else had been there, something that had seen her, recognized her, and chosen not to act. Not yet. Sebastian released her wrist slowly, his gaze still scanning the street. Calculating. "They are not done," he said quietly, and there was no uncertainty in his voice, only a measured understanding of what came next. Emily let out a slow breath, her chest still tight. "Why did they leave?" she asked, because that part did not make sense. If they had found her, why stop? Why wait? Sebastian's eyes met hers again, darker now, heavier with something that felt like truth she was not ready for. "Because they are not sure what you are," he said, and that single sentence changed everything, because it meant she was no longer just human. In their eyes, she was something unknown, something worth studying, something that did not fit into their rules. Emily felt the weight of that settle in her chest. "And when they figure it out?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sebastian stepped closer, not threatening, not forcing, but deliberate. "Then they will not hesitate," he said, and for the first time, the silence that followed was not empty, it was waiting. Emily looked at him, really looked at him now, at the man who stood between her and something she could not even name. And for the first time since the night began, her fear shifted into something else, something clearer, something more focused. "Then tell me everything," she said, her voice steadier than she expected, because there was no point in pretending anymore, no point in holding on to a life that had already slipped away. Sebastian studied her for a moment, as if measuring whether she truly understood what she was asking, and then he nodded once, slow, deliberate. "There is a world that exists alongside yours," he began, his voice calm but edged with something ancient, hidden, structured, controlled by laws that have existed long before your history was written. Emily listened, her pulse steadying as her mind shifted from fear to understanding. "My kind," he continued, are bound to those laws. We remain unseen. We do not interfere. We do not leave traces. His gaze sharpened slightly. Unless something forces us to. Emily's breath caught softly. Like me, she said, and he did not deny it. Yes, he answered. You are now a disruption, a signal that should not exist, and signals attract attention. Emily absorbed that, the logic of it, settling into place even if the reality still felt impossible. So what does that make me? She asked, because that question had been building since the moment he said the word Mark. Sebastian stepped closer, the space between them closing until she could feel that same subtle shift in the air again, that same unnatural stillness that no longer felt entirely foreign. It makes you something they will not ignore, he said quietly. And then, softer, more certain, and something I cannot walk away from. Emily's chest tightened at that, not from fear this time, but from the weight of what it meant, because whatever had started tonight was not ending. It was expanding, pulling her deeper into a world she had never seen but was now part of, whether she understood it or not. And as the city lights flickered around them, returning to normal as if nothing had happened, she realized something she could not unthink. Her life had not just changed, it had been